And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. That's right. I said welcome back because I know you were just listening to our stuff and you came back because you loved it so much you wanted more. Folks, you're brilliant. That was a fantastic move because we have a lot more for you. Now, why do we have a lot more for you? Because this is the podcast that's about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And you cracked our code. Today's guest is, in fact, a podcaster. Great job. I told you you were brilliant. Folks, the way that this works is that this is the place where we all come together to raise each other up, and this is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So let's get sailing, bring in our guest for today. Please welcome to the show, U.S. Army veteran, author of Stop Leading on Empty, a common sense guide to leading without burning out, and host of the podcast Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Please welcome Doug Thorpe to the show. Doug, how you doing, brother?
I'm great, Rory. Pleasure to be here and looking forward to this. I've had this on the books for a while.
I appreciate that very much. Thanks for coming on the show too. I know you're busy. You got a lot of stuff going on. You're running leadership programs and stuff. Before we, get into everything you and I can unpack, go ahead and just tell everybody who is Doug Thorpe. What are you about, and what brings you here today, brother?
Yeah, appreciate that. Well, let me start with a quick little story. I tell people, and it's a joke in my family. They tease me about being captain of the crossing guard. In my day in elementary school, we used to send kids into traffic with badges and signs to stop the cars and let other kids cross the intersections going into the school. And of course, that's unheard of now. That people would think we were insane, but in my day, it was an honor to be on the crossing guard. And as a young child, I watched those upperclassmen and I aspired to do that. Well, long story short, I did just that. I went to work and I made my way up to be captain of the whole crossing guard. I got to be the lead dog. And I tell that story because it wasn't about the ego or the fame or notoriety of it by any means. I'm not even sure I knew what that was at that time, but I had this sense of service. I just thought that was so cool that a group of students could help the other students and do something for the community. And at, 10, 11, 12 years old, it's hard to imagine thinking that way, but I remember thinking that way. And that kind of set the tone for a lot of what I did throughout my school years and on into it's part of the reason I wanted to join the Army and become an officer and did that, got that done, and then decided I really didn't want to make the military a career, but made a transition into banking of all things, and was able through a series of opportunities to join a large regional bank that was headquartered in Houston, where I live, and little did I know it was ultimately going to be one of the most successful banks of its kind and size literally in the history of banking. And it was a predecessor to what is now the Chase Bank of Texas. So after 20 years at that institution in various leadership and executive roles, I took an early retirement after we had already merged with Chase. And so I get to claim the line on my resume that I'm a Chase banker, and it's all true. But there were a couple of things I learned in that experience as a banker. Number one, we had an amazing internal leadership discipline that I just assumed all banks work that way. And oh my God, did I learn the hard way that that was not true later in life. And I can talk about that some more later. But the other thing, we were largely a commercial bank, so all of the customers I dealt with owned businesses. So I was getting to work with entrepreneurs, with business leaders, and yeah, I worked with a few publicly traded companies, but predominantly privately owned businesses. So I watched the entrepreneur journey. I got intrigued by that, and when I did leave the bank, I turned my career into a consulting business. I had a little bit of my own entrepreneurial background. My mother, of all things, she started a business when I was 5 years in fifth grade. She left her day job and wanted to go plot her own destiny. And I didn't understand what that really meant. And oh, by the way, she was a single mom and I
Ah,
was her only child. So great risk, great adventure, great motivation, but a lot of things about her mindset and her heart for doing that inspired me. And so all of that kind of came to a crescendo in those later years after leaving the bank. And I started consulting with businesses of all sizes and types. And the consulting business led me into what I do now in executive coaching because every one of my consulting clients at one point or another in the engagement gave me the finger wag, said, come in here and shut the door behind you. I need to talk. And they would unload about some issue they were having in their own personal leadership journey, some frustration with a boss or some challenge with the team or just something that was going on. And I was intrigued by that and very curious. And it landed me right back in the thinking of this whole notion of what it means to be a good leader. And I've been a student of leadership thought my whole career. I was a management major in school, pursued an MBA, did all that, and was able to pull it all together in right after the crash of '08 and hung out a shingle as an executive coach and a business advisor. So I kind of blended the best of both worlds into the practice I now have. And um, I call my company Headway Exec, as in, you need help to make headway, we can do it.
I love it. I love it. So you started a consulting business after the crash of '08.
I
Wow.
did. Well, it was more of the coaching. We talked about it in the green room on the in the middle of the crash of '08. I lost a company that I had founded. I had a service company that happened to be, unfortunately, as it turned out, I was directly related to mortgage banking, and mortgage finance was ground zero of the crash of '08.
Right.
And the entire mortgage finance market came to a grinding halt in September of '07, and you could not get a home loan for about 45 days. All banks shut down, stopped lending. It was an ugly, ugly event, and it took my company, among many others, with it. So, um, having had to close that business early in '08, I wasn't sure what I was really going to do. And of course, the market was tight, unemployment was double digits.
Oh yeah.
Here I'd been an entrepreneur. It was a lousy time to think about starting a new business. And um, what I discovered was a critical need in the community to provide job search assistance to the thousands of people that were on the street. And my entrepreneurial juices kicked in again. I pulled together a team of folks, a couple of small investments, and started a nonprofit that we called Jobs Ministry Southwest. The model was a non-denominational, faith-based organization that encouraged people to come in, work with us, and we were teaching new and improved methods of going out to the job market and finding jobs. LinkedIn had just kind of started up. It was still a very new and unknown phenomenon.
Right.
We cracked the code on using LinkedIn. We had a workshop we did at a special program I called 12.5 Ways to Get Ahead on LinkedIn. The first time I presented that in a public forum, I had 450 people attend. I had the
Wow.
fire marshal on my case because our building only could accommodate 250 and we had 450.
Shh. I mean, that's revolutionary back then. But I mean, I
It
remember back
was.
then in
Well,
'08, it was
it
like,
was even the program was even featured in Fortune magazine at the time. So
nice. Nice. I was going to say that was the days of
it was a
like,
great.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, it was the days of. I mean, Monster.com was out there as a job board, Career Builder, and some of those
Right.
brands were active. None of those exist anymore, but they were out there. But yeah, LinkedIn was the new wave, and we ended up we had great success. We had a very high uh, success rate of people that were following our guidance and our structure and our programs were having great success landing new jobs even in a tough job market. So
Wow.
we were real proud of the outcome. And over about a 4 year period, we coached over 4,500 people through our program. And
Wow.
that's what
Yeah.
really solidified my mindset about the value of individual coaching and personal development through an executive coaching kind of program.
Hmm. Okay, so you got your start that way. And then after that, is that when you went off and said, I'm just going to focus on the coaching program?
Yeah, yeah. Pretty much long about 2013, 2014, I had been invited to do a couple more consulting gigs in parallel with my nonprofit work. And I was back on the road traveling and decided, no, really don't want to do that anymore. I've done enough of that. I had the million frequent flyer miles and all that fun stuff that you get to claim, but it's not as glorious as it sounds.
Right. Doug, I got to give you a ton of credit, man. I remember '08 very well. I owned a very large real estate company back then, 5 offices in 2 states. Everything was going great, and then kaboom.
Oh, boom. Yep.
Yeah, and so everything that followed after it. But long story short, I feel your pain in that story. So, but I also remember the landscape, man. And I mean, I looked at a whole bunch of different ways to maybe start this or start that and so on. And it was not exactly optimal to start a new business or a new thing. And you just said, you know what, here we go, not for profit, no less. And you just started it
Yep.
up.
Well, and I think to talk about the people side of all that, one of the other elements, as many might recall, there were people that had been in corporate jobs for 10, 15, and 20 years, had never had to look for a job. They had never been terminated. They had never been reduction enforced. They had been riding the crest of the wave of whatever industry they were in. And now all of a sudden they had this glowing pink slip in their hand and had no friggin' clue what to do.
Yeah.
Um, their resume had been the old school type it up on a word processor and go to Kinko's and get 1,000 copies made. And then that was the way you tried to go get a job. Well, none of that worked at that time. And so we taught some pretty revolutionary ideas about crafting resumes and telling personal success stories, coming up with a tool we called the accomplishments inventory. And I can get into all that. And I actually use it today in a lot of my executive coaching. But it was a whole new way of looking at things. And let me, real quick, let me tell you an
Yeah, sure.
interesting sidebar. Me being a banker at the time, we had run a couple of hundred people through the program, and I wanted to know the statistics. I wanted to know, our success rates and how did we need to tweak the program and do all that. And what I discovered when we made the first cut against our database, I had a right on the nose, right on the dot, down to the decimal, I had a 66% success rate. Two-thirds of our graduates were landing jobs in a reasonably short period of time. I didn't like 66%. That felt like a fail to me. It's
Hmm.
like, why can't we do better than that? What did we miss? And I got to analyzing the rosters, and the organization was still small enough at the time that I pretty well knew everybody's individual story one by one, that I could look down the database and I could recall things. And a light bulb went off. And when I started really doing a little more critical analysis of the whole population, I was reminded of a principle I had adopted or embraced a long time ago in leadership and management. If you've got a team of people, you probably have a fairly normalized bell curve of performance, attitude, ability, a whole package. If you plotted that out and your population divides up in a third, a third, and a third, you got roughly a third of your people that are going to be your rock stars, your super performers, high producers, reliable, dependable. You don't have to tell them much. They just lean in and go get it done. Then you've got that middle third. They're okay. They're working their job description. They're fulfilling the mission. You can goose them every now and then and get a little more, and that's all fine. But then you got that other last remaining third, and those are the guys and gals that give you trouble. They don't want to follow the rules. They're constantly sniping. They're asking questions. They're causing trouble. They're, just making life miserable for other people and dragging the team down. And that was just a really loose thumbnail opinion that I had. I never talked about it much. I just observed it, and every time I looked at an organization, inevitably I could identify that division. But when I looked at my population of job seekers, boom, there it was, a third, a third, and a third. I had about a third of my people. We had one lady, to give you an example, way out on the high end of the scale. We had one lady that came. Our format was we met weekly and we had a 6-part program, and we presented one part of the program every week. And so in 6 weeks, you would get our whole enchilada, you'd get the whole story, and you could go to work. Well, she happened to come in the middle of the cycle, which did happen to be our resume writing, which, by the way, was step number 3 in our process. It wasn't step 1, but nonetheless, she had come. She got excited. She hung around after class, talked to a couple of the instructors, got some more tidbits and ideas. She went home at noon, made some phone calls, had an appointment for an interview the very next day, had her brand new, totally revolutionary resume format that we're teaching in hand, got the job. And by the time she came back to us next week, she was already employed. Now, that was rare, but that was an example of that hard charger, top of the stack, third of the people. Now, the middle third, relative to our program, they would come, they would listen, they would follow the rules, they would work with it. They struggle maybe a little bit here and there, but generally they would try to follow the script and do what they needed to do, and they would ultimately have some success. But then we had that bottom third of folks. They would come to our sessions and literally they would listen to our speakers, and they would stand up in the middle of the session and say, "That's bullshit. Pardon me. I don't believe this. That's not going to work. That's not what happens. You can't tell me to do that." And they would argue with us. And I'm like, and we would try to gracefully get them out of the flow and go have a one-on-one and talk to them, but they would just be, adversarial on every turn of everything. And there were a couple of people that I had to invite to leave and just not waste our time.
That's so crazy.
But again, that was ultimately, the nature of the human species.
That's, I mean, honestly, I don't know how you got through that. There was days when I'm sure it was like, why am I doing this, right?
Well, truthfully, not, and it was largely because of the other 2/3
Uh,
that kept us motivated and kept us going. Because number one, we had factual data that said it worked. What we had come up with, and I say we, I recruited a core team of experts that I had gotten to know in the Houston community, people that were either recruiters, placement personnel, placement professionals, training and development type people. It wasn't all my intellectual property that was coming together. I orchestrated the construction of a body of work that ultimately became there. It is another book I wrote. It's called Strive. Strive was our acronym for the program. STRIVE was the acronym of our 6-step model, and I wrote a short book about it. Is still to this day a pretty darn good approach for people that are looking for, they're in between jobs, looking for new opportunities.
nice, nice. So, all right. I mean, that's how you get the start. That's where the leadership program comes from. Where's the podcast come into all this?
Well, the podcast, actually, the early editions of that were a spinoff of the nonprofit. I was following up our weekly sessions with kind of a commentary and a summation of whatever our guest speaker had brought that week. It was
Mhm.
just me being the talking head on the podcast. Um, when I look back on it now, as all aspiring podcasters do, you look at your early body of work and you go, "Oh, geez, that was so bad."
I think we all cringe when we hear our
We
early
all
episodes.
cringe, and the pucker factor goes up when you think about it. But nonetheless, I did have some episodes that were all related to that. It kind of went dormant for a little while, but about 4 years ago, I really launched it in earnest. I really kind of rekindled. Number one, I landed on the title, which when I started my executive coaching practice, I had the tagline leadership powered by common sense. I went out and got it trademarked and all of that. And when I started really thinking about exploring the recreation or reopening of my podcast, I decided, well, that's a pretty good title for a show, I think. So I'll just pull that forward. Interesting side story to that. In the early days of my coaching firm, I interviewed a marketing agency to come help me do some work and promote the brand and do some things. And we were doing the classic sort of intake onboarding discussion. And I introduced the tagline in the show title, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. And this marketing person goes, "Ooh, ugh, we got to get rid of that." And I went, "Oh, why so?" And then they went off on I won't even explain what they said, but they didn't like it. They thought it was unmarketable and not worthy. And I said, "Guess what? You're not going to be my marketing agency."
That was my next question. So how long did that last, that relationship?
About the next 5 minutes, and that was
There you
it.
go. Right on.
Meeting was
That's
over.
awesome. That's
Meeting was
awesome.
over.
All right, that's awesome. Leadership powered by common sense. Were they afraid of offending somebody or
Yeah, they said that was off-putting to some, and it would alienate people. And I said,
uh,
yeah, but you know, part of branding is finding your audience, is finding your people.
right.
You're not trying to attract the world. You're trying to attract a very specific persona. I said, aren't we going to get to that in your model of marketing? Aren't we going to have that part of the, well, yeah, that's part of it. I said, okay, well, we're already there. If you're telling me there will people that tagline will alienate, so be it. They're not my people.
They're not my people. There you go. The way the coaching program stands now, is it primarily focused at businesses who want to hire you to train their leaders, or is it more focused on individual leaders who want to become better at what they're doing?
It's really a both and. It has evolved to be a little bit of a hybrid offering. I look at it again. If I look at my numbers, it's about a 50-50 split. Half of my clients are actually corporate leaders where the corporation has come to hire a coach, and they have a population of leaders they want to run through some kind of cohort or development program. Maybe it's those that they call their high potentials, or maybe it's those that are already executive level, but they're wanting to give them some extra support and guidance and opportunity. Occasionally, I will get invited. There'll be someone. They'll tell me, "Well, this person is slated to be the next CXX of our company, and here are three things we want them to work on to fit the job best." So I'll get asked to do that kind of an engagement. But the other half, and this is back to my own personal core passion, not that I don't like working with the corporate executives, I do, because again, I lived in the chase world for a long time. I've walked in boardrooms of all shapes and sizes, and that doesn't bother me. But a passion I do have, personal passion, is for the entrepreneurial space. So the other half of my
Uh,
business is primarily the owner, founder, small business leader who is looking to either build a leadership team in their company that they've not yet assembled, or the person that feels the pressure of running into the invisible wall, and they know their company is primed and ready for the next step, but they just can't seem to break through the wall and get there.
Nice.
And uh, spoiler alert, 99.9% of the reason you can't break through is you, my friend. So
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so then let me ask you this. Who is the podcast aimed at? What's the purpose you're trying to accomplish with the podcast?
the podcast really does try to delicately straddle that line between those two communities. And I try to do what I can with each episode to kind of articulate one way or the other which part of the audience might get the more benefit out of it. But I blend and weave episode by episode. We put out a lot of volume. We publish shows twice a week. So, that's by most podcast standards I can identify. That's a pretty aggressive production schedule.
Sure.
And um, with that volume, I try to shift gears back and forth between the message that might be very skewed to the Fortune 500 mindset versus the small business
Sure.
owner.
It looks like I mean, I took a listen to a bunch of your episodes, but from what I was able to see, at least recently, looks like it's interview heavy, or is it interview mostly, as opposed to solo episodes, the makeup of the podcast itself?
It, yeah, again, high percentage of interview
Hmm.
format. Always like having a guest on there. I've done very few. I can probably count on one hand the number of commentary type episodes I've shot where it's just me
Okay.
sharing. But probably if I tried to plot it, I'd say at least once a year, maybe twice a year, I may shoot an episode where I'm kind of summarizing some themes that I'm hearing from my clients. And if I get a pattern of issues and concerns that people are having, I'll do a more of a commentary type episode talking about those things.
Excellent. And again, with the episodes I heard, it seems as though you use the podcast for education purposes, like helping people for free, through the podcast with their businesses. It also seems like it's a bit of a marketing arm for you, saying, hey, if you want more help, then here I am. How do you get the best use out of the podcast in terms of the podcast and the business and how they relate?
I do. In terms of mission and vision, I see the podcast more as a labor of love. It's a passion to serve. It is that interest in trying to share good information by identifying, great guests that have something to share. And I'm okay if it stops there. If we can get that message out to the world and just maybe pique somebody's interest in a particular adjustment or new direction they might like to consider. If we can do that with the show, I count it a great success. Now, yes, we make references. I talk about my own website and some of the services and programs that I've got going on. We do talk about that from time to time, and I do get referral business from this show. But probably in order of significance, being able to serve the greater audience community is number one. I like meeting my guests in terms of building my own network of expertise, and I do a lot of offline referral type connections. If I meet somebody that I can't serve for what their immediate need is, but I know one of my guests is a specialist in that area, I make those referrals, and I probably send out 3 or 4 connection emails a week, on that kind of activity. So I count that as a value and something I'm happy to do, being more of people. And then lastly, if I get direct business from it, I'm certainly honored and feel blessed to do so. And I do. I get leads periodically. It's not to be honest, for other podcasters out there, it's for me, it's not an overabundance of leads. I'm not flooded by them, but what I do find is the ones that do reach out to me are very qualified, good fits for what I'm doing, and they're ready to go. So my
Excellent.
lead to close on that is really minimal.
Yeah. Well, that's excellent. The if since that's sort of the mission of the podcast is to serve and give the information, do you do a lot of promotion for the podcast? And if so, what has worked for you, what has not?
Um, I have done some promotions in the past. What I'm doing now, I've taken advantage of a lot of the great tools that are emerging right now, and I do have my episodes being processed. The long form episodes that end up on the streaming services and on YouTube get processed into reels and shorts that are 60
Yeah.
seconds or less. And I propagate all of the social media channels with those episodes. And in terms of sheer numbers, those get a higher, you know, um, what do you call it? A hit rate on viewing. Um, my average 60-second reel will have, 400 or 500 clicks and views on it, whereas the long form might have, two or 300 in the first couple of days that it comes out. And then, there's sort of some residual activity on it, but uh,
Right.
the reels and the shorts get a lot more attention.
Sure. Sure. I understand. So then, really, no plans to monetize the podcast or anything like that at this point, since you're using it the way that you are, right?
Well, I'm not going to say no plans. I'm actually talking with another agency right now, exploring some offerings that they've got on the way they host shows and how they work some things. And there's some interesting opportunity there that haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. Um, we're still dating.
I appreciate your honesty. All right, sounds good. I don't want you to give away any of the secret sauce. You know what's going on
Yeah, I'm a
behind the
little
scenes. So,
reluctant to. Not that I don't like them or don't don't. I, for one, when I do talk about other services and amenities that I might be deploying in my own business, I don't speak of them until I've fully vetted and implemented and feel very confident in making the recommendation or endorsement of them.
yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
a safe bet. That's a safe bet all the time. So, you always have to. I mean, we're the ones who are in charge of the stew, so you got to be careful who you let in the kitchen. I understand.
right. That's right.
Totally understand. All right, beautiful.
Right.
I usually try to fit this question in at some point. I'm going to go ahead and throw it in here now. Um,
All right. I'm
in,
ready.
all right. In terms of doing your podcast, what is it about doing your podcast that you love the most? And what is it about doing your podcast that you just absolutely hate the most?
Interesting question. Love the most. I absolutely love doing the interviews. I love getting a guest online and just chatting them up and talking about it. As you did for me, Rory. I spend 10 or 15 minutes in the green room when we're talking. I will say this: I've abandoned the prep call process that some use. I ultimately found it to be a waste of time because I seldom landed anybody that I really didn't want to talk to on the show. Um, and I will say that I feel blessed because I've got enough mileage and traction now that I am getting some very credible PR agents and agencies reaching out to me promoting guests. And when I get those, I get a full one sheet um, summary. I get links for samples of their other appearances. I can do all that vetting on my own time and qualify someone to join the show. And then when they do come on, I spend the 10 or 15 minutes in the green room talking to them before we go live. at that point, I just love being able to do the interview, and so that's great fun for me. I have some broadcasting in my DNA. My dad, before he passed, when I was very young, I was only two when he died, but he was a NBC news anchor and NBC radio way back in
Really?
the day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and um, he had an intern, a guy named Mike Wallace.
Get out of
If that
town.
name rings a bell.
Well, of course.
Mike Wallace is now, longtime retired CBS anchor, and his son now, Chris Wallace, I think, is actually retired already.
Yeah.
We're talking many, many years now. But yeah, Mike Wallace was my dad's intern and at NBC Radio, and I've got pictures of them working together. And um, so getting behind a mic, I guess you could argue somewhere, somehow is in my DNA. So I enjoy doing it.
All right. I love that. I love that. Now, the part that you hate.
The part that I hate, I guess ultimately I would say it's the production. Uh, um, I have chosen not to outsource my production. Um, Probably one day I will, but I have found some tools. So I have a production suite that I've cobbled together with some of it's AI technology, some of it's other automation. And I have a pretty tight process. I can take a 45-minute episode, do all of my production um, in about an hour and a half.
Hmm. Okay.
And that means packaging the video, um, stylizing everything, queuing up a blog post article to go in my RSS feed, positioning the audio file on my audio hosting, cutting everything I need for YouTube descriptions, all the social media stuff, and pushing that out to um, publishing tools that post them on designated days and times. So
Mhm.
it's a pretty highly automated process that I've been able to cobble together.
Excellent. All right. So you dislike it, but it's not that bad.
Yeah, it's hard to say I have anything that I just cringe every time I have to do it. I really don't. I think I've designed around the pain points that I had originally and filled those gaps with some tools that do the yucky stuff for me.
Nice. Nice. The now, as far as your coaching business, the I know that you have an offer out there, basically to say, hey, come talk to me. You want to talk about your free offer that you offer everybody?
Yeah, basically it's a little bit old school. My primary offer is just simply book a consult with me. I'd love to meet you and hear your story about where you are in your journey, whether you own a business or you're climbing a corporate ladder somewhere, either one, or you're in the middle of trying to make a transition, do something different. Happy to talk about that. Typically, what I do in these consult calls, we just explore what's on your mind and what you might be facing and wanting to do, and then I'll shoot straight with you. I am the common sense guy. I'll tell you if there's anything I can help you with, or maybe there's somebody in my network I'm happy to refer you to and make that connection. Like I said, but yeah, that's the basic deal. If there's an opportunity in there somewhere for both of us, would love to engage and we'll craft something together. Most of my coaching is fairly a la carte. I don't have a lot of rigid structural, you got to buy 12 months or 9 months of some kind of program. Most of my offerings are month to month and scalable.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Well, we'll make sure the link for that is in the show notes, of course. Yeah, I really hate asking this question, but I have found that people like the answers, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you too. Um, but I just really hate it. Uh, how do you utilize, or do you, and if so, how do you utilize AI in doing your podcast in your business?
I'm an early adopter, always have been. I have been working with AI now about a year, and I continue to grow application of it in what I'm trying to do every chance I get. And I've got, as an example, I've got some tools now that I don't know if others are experiencing this, but I know in my own LinkedIn feed and some of my other social feeds, I'm getting a lot of chatter about being able to build these AI bots and agents to do a lot of the menial things like initial outreach, the early email. If you get a lead, somebody hits your website and fills out a form, when do you send? What do you send? All of that. AI is great for automating some of that. Now, I still exercise heavy human intervention on final content, but I am deploying AI to help me draft first cuts at ideas that I come up with. If
Wow.
Historically, the blog writing I did and even the book writing I've done started with some quirky idea that I'm a people watcher when I'm out in public. I'm an observer of humankind. I and I've been accused of crafting some strange connections between if this happened, I see it this way, and there's an odd connection there that people tell me I see, and have often been the subjects of some of my articles and ultimately now my podcasts. Give you a quick example. There's a story I repurposed just recently. I'd published it a couple of years ago, but I thought it would be pertinent to bring it back up again. Story is, young executive walks into a meeting with some senior executives, and lo and behold, he realizes the chairman's sitting there at the end of the table, and he goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry to disturb." And the chairman says, "Oh, I've been disturbed my whole life." And my quirky way of looking at that is, as a leader, my argument is I think you need to stay disturbed. I think about the time you settle into some zone of comfort, you're probably missing opportunity and you're probably not paying attention to the critical things going on around you. So
Yeah.
being disturbed as a leader is a good thing.
There you go. There you go. Well, congrats to you for embracing AI like that. That's really cool. I'm glad it's working for
Yep. Yep.
you. All right, that's wonderful. Well, let me kind of start to wrap this up a little bit since we're pretty close to our time here. Um, as you look at having done your podcast as long as you have and everything you've accomplished, looking back on it, what's the best piece of advice you can give to podcasters who are out there who are just not quite where you are yet?
I think the one thing I'll amplify and reinforce is a tidbit I got when I first started looking to the experts when I wanted to stand up my show. The one key refrain everybody kept repeating was be consistent. Find your rhythm. If it's one show a month, that's okay. Do one show a month. Find a time slice that your output becomes reliable because the logic, as I understood it then and believe it now, is the when you do attract an audience, when they figure out your rhythm, they're going to be ready for the next one, and you better deliver that next one, or else you'll get deleted from the playlist.
Yeah.
And I think that consistency, as a producer or host, it requires a commitment. And whatever standard you set for yourself, you better own it and you better go for it. And if it's somehow not going to work, you need to adjust it quick and get to one that will work. But yeah, that notion of being consistent, I think, is the key word that I found.
Well, that's always great advice. I love that one. Yeah, and especially from someone who's been doing this for a minute, that sounds like it rings true. So I appreciate you bringing that today. Doug, I love
Yeah.
this. I really do. How do people reach you? How do they reach out to you? How do they get in touch with you if they want to find out more about everything you're doing?
Yeah, the easiest way, perhaps to remember it is my name, DougThorpe.com. That's Thorpe on the end, e.com. That's where you'll find the link for the free consult and the booking time. It'll also refer you to a couple of my other, web offerings. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm at linkedin.com/n/Doug Thorpe. I have that unique URL, no extra numbers or hieroglyphics after it. I grabbed that early in the LinkedIn domain world, but yeah, I'm all over LinkedIn and all over most of the social media, so it should be pretty easy to get a hold of.
Excellent, excellent. Doug, thank you for showing up today, for telling everybody everything you have, talking about your business, and giving out such great advice, and just leading by example on this thing we all love doing called podcasting. It's been great.
You bet. My pleasure, Rory. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for being on. Folks, that's been another absolutely awesome episode of the Podcaster Nation. The reason we have such incredible people come on here to give these, good advice and great stories is because this is the podcast that's about podcasters. It's for podcasters and it's done by podcasters. Folks, as we proved again today, this is the place where the rising tide truly raises all ships. So keep sailing.